Hello, I am Mr. Brown, your science teacher. I make science videos for students of all ages. So today, gather the family around and let's check out 12 interesting science sites around the world. Our first stop takes us to the middle of the Australian desert, the outback, and there's not much there except this huge giant rock in the middle of nowhere. The locals call it Uluru, and it's a big tourist attraction. You can get up close, and there's trails and waterfalls, and this is what it looks like if you go up on the top as you look out into the emptiness of the Australian outback. Next, let's go up to Alaska, where oil was discovered up in the Arctic, and they needed a way to get that oil all the way down to load onto ships. So they built a giant pipeline to carry that oil. And this is a really interesting piece of engineering. This pipeline goes for hundreds of miles through all sorts of different environments across tundra, across valleys and forests, and even across many rivers until finally the pipeline ends up in the Pacific and they load it onto ships. Next, let's go to Mexico, to the giant crystal cave. We're going to need to go down about, 280, 290 meters below the surface, and we find giant crystals. Look at that. This is no joke. When this was discovered, um, this is the biggest crystals ever found. I mean, look at the size of this guy there. Here's another shot of the giant crystal cave. Remarkable. We are in Greenland next. Um, as if you know the history, they named this place Greenland in hopes of getting people to move there at one time, but it's mostly just ice. Although they do experience summertime. Here's a village in Greenland during the summer, and I like how they paint their houses in all these different happy colors. Of course, winter will come, and here's a shot of a Greenland village in the middle of winter. Next, we're going to the deserts of Arizona. All right, not much out there except open desert. And then we find this giant hole. What's going on here? Well, this is actually a crater. About 50,000 years ago, an asteroid from space smashed into Arizona and left this big hole. And it's open to the public today. Here is a bunch of tourists hanging out at the edge of this massive crater. Interesting. Next, we are in France. All right, the year is 1940, and a couple teenagers are poking around in a cave and they discover something. Oh, yeah, what'd you guys find down there? Oh, nothing much, except 19,000-year-old artwork that was made by Ice Age hunters. This is a remarkable discovery. This artwork was still intact 19,000 years after the Ice Age, and it's considered one of the finest pieces of art, and it's protected, and it's really quite remarkable. We are in a small Arctic island called Svalbard up near the North Pole. I can see it looks like a polar bear. Not much going on here except ice and this strange staircase leading into the side of a hill. What do you guys got going on in here? Well, this is the world's seed vault. It is an emergency storage for all of the world's crops. If something were to go wrong and we need to replant the world's crops, this is where the seeds are kept. Interesting. Next, we are in South America in the vast Amazon jungle. The Amazon rainforest is so big that I need to superimpose a map of the United States over it to give you some idea of just how immense this place is. It's just miles and miles and miles of rainforest. Now, what's interesting is that there are people that live there that are uncontacted tribes. They have no contact with the outside world. Here they are looking up at us. We're in a helicopter. We're looking down at them, and they're wondering what the heck is going on here, because they're so isolated deep in the forest. They've never had contact with the modern world. Some of them get a little bit angry here. You can see a couple of the warriors are shooting bow and arrows up at the helicopter. And here is a shot of some of their tribal paint, and kind of looks like Spider-Man a little bit. All right. You might enjoy cosplay here in the States. But anyway, uncontacted tribes of the Amazon. Interesting. Next, we're back in Mexico, and we're walking through the jungles at a place called Chichen Itza. The year is 1892, and we come across this hill covered with a bunch of trees. Let's clean that off and see what we got here. It's a remarkable Mayan pyramid way in the middle of the jungle. This Mayan pyramid, over 1,000 years old, has some remarkable engineering. Twice a year, on the spring equinox and the fall equinox, as the sun goes down, it casts this serpentine shadow down the staircase, ending at the serpent's head. Pretty cool engineering, Mr. Mayan people. Next, we are headed to the Persian Gulf, to a city called Dubai. What does Dubai have to offer? Well, they are home to the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. This is a real building. Look at the size of this thing in comparison to these other buildings. It's remarkable, right? Let's take a trip up to the top and look around, and yeah, that's quite a view. All right. Next, we are going to World War II. Well, during World War II, they used tanks, right? And tanks use a lot of gasoline. They're kind of fuel hogs. They really use a lot. And what happened in World War II is very often tanks ran out of gas. And very often that's where they sit. So here we are, 70 years later, and those tanks are still sitting there right where they ran out of gas, never to move ever again. And so found in places around the world, you'll find tanks from old battles years ago, where they sit right where they ran out of gas. Here is a bunch of tanks in a row sitting right where they ran out of gas. All right, next, we are going to Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, on the beaches, this is where old ships come to die. If you have an old ship and you don't need it anymore, you take it and you run it aground on the beaches of Bangladesh, and they dismantle it and take it apart for scrap metal. Here we are of a satellite view looking down, and you can see this is a giant scrapyard for old ships. Kind of a muddy, messy, dangerous job. These men, their job is to disassemble and take apart all these old ships and sell them for scrap metal. All right, thank you for joining me. Here is a list of all of the 12 interesting science sites from around the world. Go ahead and do some further research if you found this interesting. All right, thanks a lot. Bye.